Welcome back, all you awakened savages. And today, we're not talking about awakening, we're talking about death, right? Not your physical death, but the death of everything that you thought made you a man. Your name, your body, your success, your story. None of these feel real anymore. You wake up and you don't even know who you are. You look in the mirror and you see this stranger, right? You feel numb or terrified, or both. This isn't transformation, this is total annihilation. And see, if you're going through this right now, I want you to fully get this. You are not crazy. You are not broken. You're on a path that most men will never survive because they keep running back to who they thought they used to be. Right? This is ego death, and it will strip you to the bone so your soul can finally lead the way. Right? And before we go any further, right, I need to make something clear. Right? What I'm talking about isn't your average spiritual awakening. This isn't getting into meditation and realizing that you're more than the body. Right? It's not getting more intuitive or seeing angel numbers and synchronicities. And these are beautiful, right? But this, what I'm talking about today, is not that. This is ego death, and this can be actually brutal, right? It's not a realization, it's an erasure. Right? You don't evolve, you collapse. Your identity disintegrates. Right? Your past stops making sense. And for a while, you feel like absolutely fucking nothing. Right? You don't just shift how you see the world. You lose the version of you that was doing the seeing. Right? And that's what makes this different. A spiritual awakening opens your eyes, and ego death burns them out and gives you new ones. Right? So, what is the ego then? Right? Most people think ego means arrogance, being loud, controlling, needing to be right. But that's just one expression. Okay, the truth is your ego is the version of you that got built so you could survive in a world that didn't fully see you. Okay, it's your vehicle of orientation. Right? The ego isn't some evil force, it's a structure, a strategy, a set of beliefs, behaviors, and identity traits that you put on like some type of armor when you were too young to understand all the pain around you. Right? And for me, the pain started when I was about 4, maybe 5 years old. And that's when my parents separated. And when I'm a little boy, I didn't see the relevance of the situation. I didn't have the tools to see that my mum and dad, they just weren't compatible anymore and they decided to part ways. Right? Kids don't think like that. Kids take everything personally. Right? So what I did, I decided deep in my unconscious, this is my fault. Right? I'm not enough for my dad to stay. Right? And this is how it starts. Not always with some traumatic event, but for me, that would have been traumatic. Okay? And it starts with something like that, where as a child, drawing a conclusion about themselves that feels like the truth. And from that moment forward, without knowing it, I started building my ego, right? I became the tough one, the strong one, the boy who wouldn't cry, right? The one who chased validation through achievement, girls, status, survival, right? I joined gangs, I fought, I chased madness and chaos, not because I was a bad boy, but because I'd already decided that I was unworthy of love and I was trying to prove otherwise. Right? And that's what the ego does. It creates an identity to protect you from feeling, the way that you didn't want to feel again. But the cost, you lose touch with who you really are. Your ego isn't evil. It's just a solution to a problem you didn't know how to solve when you were a child. Right? And the solution becomes your identity. Right? And this is the thing. It's not truth. It's not your soul truth. It's not your intuition. It's just a highly intelligent, highly conditioned strategy built in the absence of context. And the problem is, if you never look at it, you'll build your entire life, your career, relationships, goals on top of that strategy. And no matter how much you accomplish, you'll never feel whole because the foundation isn't on truth. It's built from fear. That's why ego death feels so fucking hard at times. Because what's dying isn't just some attitude, it's the entire identity you've been performing for your entire life. And once you understand where it came from, you stop judging it, you stop running from it, and you start doing the real work of remembering who the fuck you are before the world told you who you were supposed to be. Okay, and the first part of this is it will begin to collapse, right? When my ego death began, I wasn't spiraling through some rock bottom. I'd already been there, right? I wasn't wrecked and lost and trying to find my way out. No, I'd actually built a business that I loved. I'd built my barber shop from nothing. It was my pride and joy. It wasn't just a job. It was everything to me, right? My creative outlet, my identity, my pride, as I said. And for years, I truly believed that that would be me for the rest of my life because I truly loved it. Right? I'd worked so hard to build it from nothing. So after the addiction, the prison sentences, court cases, the chaos in my life, the barber shop was proof that I had changed, right? And then the universe or God acts in mysterious ways because I had my spiritual awakening. And then I started to see things completely different, right? The same chair that I was so proud to stand behind, it started feeling different, right? I didn't hate it. I just didn't feel the way that I used to feel. And that's how the ego death begins for a lot of men. Not with this big bang, but with a slow, quiet loss of meaning. Right? I'd go to work, I'd talk to my clients like always, but I'd feel like I was watching myself do it. Right? Like I was playing this character that I had outgrown. And it's hard to put it into words, but that's what it felt like for me. And that's what they don't tell you, right? Ego death isn't just about losing your pain. Sometimes you lose the things that you love. Because if they were built on an old identity, even the good stuff, it won't survive. So selling the barber shop was one of the hardest things that I ever done in my whole entire life. Right? And it wasn't because the shop was failing, it was the actual opposite. It was getting bigger and bigger as the days went on. But because I was changing, and I knew deep down that the chapter was over. And I had been warned by this with spirit guides, but I didn't really pay attention to it. The ego death is the collapse of your constructed self. It's an identity disintegration. You stop reacting out of trauma or survival. But now, without those roles, you have nothing to anchor to. That's why most men panic, or worse, they pretend that they don't feel anything at all. And neurologically, this collapse is real, right? The brain circuit that gives you the sense of I, that starts to shut down, right? Your sense of self becomes unstable. And that's why you feel so disconnected from your job, your relationships, even your own fucking face in the mirror. And, in Zen and the Shaolin traditions, this phase is known as the formless transformation, right? So the monk doesn't just leave the world. He lets go of the self who needed the world to validate him. And the Shaolin path, that teaches that when your identity dissolves, that's when the real training begins. So letting go of something you loved isn't weakness. It's the first sign that your spirit is detaching from the illusion. Right? And also Marcus Aurelius said everything we love is on the verge of being lost. So the Stoics, they didn't cling to identity. They built their character from principle, not title. And that barbershop was never who I was. It was just where I expressed who I thought I was. So when that collapse came, I didn't fight it. I felt it. And it was hard, but I listened. And I made the hardest move that a man can make. And that is letting go of something that still worked. And also it was my security, my safety. It was my family's. I provided for them with that. But I knew it no longer served who I was becoming. So I had to take that step. And that's when the ego death really begins. Not when you lose everything, but when you walk away from what you thought you'd always want because it no longer fits the man your soul is demanding you become. Right? And after I sold the barbershop, I thought there would be some magical, epiphanies and some relief and some freedom, right? Even maybe some peace. But what I got instead, it was silence. Now, not a calm, peaceful silence, but the kind that makes you question, who the fuck am I? The kind that creeps in when the identity starts to collapse and your mind doesn't know who the fuck it is. And you're kind of lost in limbo. Right? I'd walk around the house feeling like a ghost, for a better lack of word. Right? I would still be hitting the gym. I'd still be journaling. I'd still be meditating. But everything, it didn't feel real. And I don't want to say it felt fake, but it was like that. Like I was just going through the motions. I was disconnected from my body, from my memories, from who I was in totality. And I wasn't depressed, right? I wasn't anxious. I was just absent, right? And this is the part that most gurus or whoever don't talk about. When you lose the ego, you don't just gain insight, you lose your reflection, you lose your reference point, you lose the I and all the noise that made you feel real, right? And in psychology, they call this depersonalization or derealization. And what it means is your brain can't orientate to anything familiar, so it numbs, right? And what it numbs out your survival mechanisms. So you might still go to work, right? You still might eat, you still might talk to people, but it's like you're looking at it from a detached perspective, like you're watching someone else live your life. So during the ego, kind of disintegration, your brain's identity hub goes quiet. The internal narrator is gone, right? Your sense of past, future, and even your own boundaries, they begin to kind of fade. And it's not a bug, right? It's a biological breakdown of the illusion of self. And if you don't know what's happening, then you can start to panic. You think that you're losing your mind. Or fucking worse, you think that like you're never going to come back, or you're never going to, live a normal life. And in Zen, this is called the Great Death, right? The moment where the ego collapses and no new identity is formed. It's the phase between forms where the monk must sit in you've heard them say, formless, without clinging to a story, self, or any type of security, right? And Shaolin masters, they are trained to endure psychological emptiness so they can meet reality without resistance. Okay, and also Epictetus taught that it's not things that disturb us, but our opinions about them. So when your opinions, which is your self-concept, your labels, your story, when they fall away, what's left is just raw experience. So the Stoic warrior doesn't run from the void, he learns to observe it, because silence is where the truth will speak the loudest. I remember one night sitting in the dark in this office, okay, eyes wide open, heart racing, and not knowing what part of me was even watching anymore. Now, I wasn't suicidal, but I wasn't really alive either, right? And this is why it's so difficult to explain what's going on here. And this is what the ego death does. It doesn't destroy your life. It takes away the false sense of being alive. So you can start living from something deeper than you thought, your image or your identity. But in order to get there, you have to surrender to the terror. You have to stop trying to hold on and just let go and fall. Okay? Because you're coming to the death of the persona, right? And there comes a point in this ego death journey where the grief will shift. It's no longer about losing your job, your relationships, your drive, your mission. It's about realizing that none of that was ever really you. You start seeing clearly the version of you that showed up in the world was built, right? Built to survive, built to be respected, built to fit in or to rise above. And underneath all that construction, guess what? There's a stranger. I spent years building that persona, right? The tough one, right? The guy who was respected, the addict who would always bounce back time and time again, right? The guy with the good business, right? The guy with the six pack, the guy with the answers. But that wasn't soul. That was structure. That was strategy. And the truth really hit me to my core because I'd built an entire identity on pain. My confidence was compensation for how little confidence I actually had. My strength, it was protection out of fear. My success was survival again out of fear. And when the ego finally died, I realized I'd been performing strength, but I'd been avoiding truth my whole life. And in psychology, this is called ego detachment from the persona. The persona is the mask that you wear to function in society. But if you confuse it with your core self, you end up getting lost in that performance and you never meet your truth. That's why ego death isn't a failure. It's actually the biggest freedom from the illusion that you can experience. And your brain reinforces identity through feedback loops, through praise, through attention, performance, even sometimes conflict. And the more you play the part, the more real it feels. But see, when the loop breaks, the illusion falls apart. And what's left? A blank slate. Not to perform again, but to become conscious of what you choose to carry moving forward. Right? In the Taoist warrior tradition, right, the master forgets himself to remember the way. The warrior doesn't seek self-improvement, he seeks self-erasure so that only the essential remains. Right? And in Shaolin training, they break your identity first so that the body, mind, and spirit can become one, right? And not a collection of performances. Right? And what does Seneca say? What progresses have I made? I have begun to be a friend to myself. So ego's death strips you of all the masks so that you can meet the man underneath, right? The one that you've avoided, one that you forgot, the one that you might be afraid to love. That's the death of the persona, not a breakdown. It's a rebirth, right? So it's not a loss of identity, but it's the cleansing of everything that was actually never yours, right? You stop needing to be seen. You stop trying or needing to be right. You stop performing, the healed man like I did, and you start being still. Right? That's where presence begins. That's where the truth lives. And that's where you start to hear the whispers from your soul. And once the ego died, right, there was nothing left for me to chase. No image to keep up, no identity to protect, no one to impress. But it was still me, raw, unfiltered, quiet, present. And for the first time in my life, I started to build from truth instead of pain. Okay, and this is where most men slip up. They hit the void, they feel the silence, and then they start building this new identity to escape it. Right? They become the spiritual guy, the guru, the coach, the awakened performer, and I made that mistake myself. Right? So what that meant is I had to go through this process again, but thankfully not as intense as, initially, because I had awareness, I understood it, and I had better tools. Right? But if you rebuild too fast, all you're doing is putting a fresh mask on this hollow foundation. And what saved me wasn't a new label. It was quite easy. It was structure. It was doing the boring shit that kept me here. Right? And I still do this boring shit every day to this day. Right? I train daily. And it's not about six pack and looking good. I have that, but that's a byproduct of what I do every day. Right? Because I do it to reconnect with my body and also to clear my mind. Okay, the gym for me is my place where I go when I need to think about things, I need to let go of things. Right? It's my sanctuary. Right? I fast. Right? This isn't, again, it's not to burn fat, but again, it's to face the cravings and master my impulses and delay gratification. Right? A journal. Right? This is not just for clarity, but this is to actually get all the shit that's out here on here, to see the truth and to see what I'm running from. Right? I spend time in nature. Okay? And nature's again a place where I know that I can go in there and spend 20 minutes, half an hour, and I can come back out feeling rejuvenated. And that's how I rebuilt, not through motivation, but through daily aligned actions. Because structure rewires identity. And in the absence of ego, your nervous system needs to be grounded, anchored, not to control you, but to keep you drifting back to your old self. Your rituals become your spine, right? They're not habits. They are non-negotiables. They're reminders of who you really are. And the brain thrives on predictable patterns. So in the ego death, your default identity scripts, they start to disappear, which then can cause decision fatigue, anxiety, cognitive collapse. But see, daily structure, that restores coherence. It gives your mind a job so that your soul start to lead. Shaolin monks train every day, same time, same movement, same silence, not to become more, but to dissolve the self completely in devotion. Right? The warrior isn't trying to be enlightened, he's practicing presence. Right? That's what ritual is. It's remembering that with every breath, you are not your thoughts. You are the one who moves away. Right? Marcus Aurelius, he didn't rise through hustle harder, grind, grind, grind. No, he rose through rhythm. Right? At dawn, when you have trouble getting out of bed, have this thought ready, he wrote. I'm rising to do the work of a man. And that's how I saw it too. See, my morning training, my meditation, my journaling, my stillness, it wasn't self-improvement. It was my return to self-command, to not performing anymore, not seeking, just showing up in that moment, right? one rep at a time, one breath at a time, just one act of presence at a time. And that's what it means to rebuild after an ego death. You don't find yourself. You build from what's real, right? And you build slow, brick by brick, ritual by ritual, truth by truth. And this is where a lot of men make mistakes, because after the ego death, they try to build this new identity just like the last one. But now it wears mala beads and goes to sound baths and says the word frequency a lot and love and light. Right? That's still ego. It's just swapped costumes. So the question is, how do you rebuild your life from truth, not from trauma, right? From essence, not from ego. Now, there's two forms of creation. You've got ego-based creation and superconscious creation. Now, ego-based creation comes from fear, right? From the story that you're not enough, you're not safe, you're not loved, you're not worthy, all of this. So you build things, relationships, businesses, even spiritual identities as a way to avoid that fear. But see, a superconscious creation, that comes from the truth of who you are before the wounding, right? It's driven by what you truly love, right? What calls to your heart without an agenda, not to prove, not to protect, but to express, to experience, to align. Like, what does your heart truly want? If, for example, if money was no object, what would you love to create just for the sake of creating it? Okay, and that's the shift after an ego death. You don't just rebuild a new mask, you recreate your life from soul level desires, heart level desires, and you become the channel instead of this performer. Okay, and let's go over, I'll go over 5 moves that you can do to to rebuild from truth, right? Okay, so let's go move number 1, right? You need to recognize the temptation to rebrand your ego. The ego doesn't die easily, right? It's been there for a long time. It's going to fight, it's going to throw up everything it possibly can, okay? Because it evolves. So after the awakening, your old identity is gone, but the mind wants to feel safe again. So it starts to build this new one. Right, so you go from healer to guru, from hustler to solopreneur, from this broken man to this Instagram mystic. Right, don't fall for it. Right, this isn't truth. This is strategy in a new disguise. Before you create anything, right, sit with the question: am I creating from love or from lack? What does my heart truly desire? Right, and this is so important that we create from your soul desire, your heart. Right, and then move number 2. You identify your ego's core creative strategy, right? Every man builds his life on top of a core lie, right? A story he decided was true when he was too young to know any better. Like I mentioned earlier about my parents separating. And that lie becomes the engine behind everything, your career, your relationships, your goals, and it's all built on fucking quicksand. And I've seen this with myself and all the men that I've worked with, right? There's 6 patterns that keep us running in circles. Okay, you might have one of these, you might have all of these, right? These are the 6 main ones. There's more, but these are the 6 most common that I've discovered, right? I'm not good enough, right? So you chase the next achievement, the next promotion, the next level, but it's never enough, right? You hit the goal and immediately the goalposts move, right? Sound familiar? Okay, number 2, I'm not worthy. So you work twice as hard as everyone else, hoping someone will finally see your value. You give and you give, but you never feel like you've earned what it is that you want. Right? Number 3, I don't belong. Right? You build the biggest group, the biggest network, collect the most friends, create the perfect image, but inside, you're still that kid who feels like an outsider. That was me. Right? I'm not ready. So you study every course, read every book, get every certification. You're always preparing, right? But you're never starting. Right? You're always getting ready to start, but you're never ready. Right? Again, I struggled with this. Number 5, I'm not capable, right? So you collect resources, collect credentials, stack money, thinking that if you have enough tools, you'll finally be able to do what scares you, right? And the last one, I'm insignificant, right? So you chase status, you build your brand, you fight for recognition, but the spotlight never feels bright enough because you still feel invisible. And here's the thing, you might have one or you might have all of them, right? Like I probably have a little bit of all. But all these 6 boil down to the same core wound. There's something fundamentally broken about me that I need to fix before I can have the life that I want. That is the biggest lie. And it's been running your show for decades, right? And your version might be, I'm not good enough, right? So you're just a constant overachiever, or I'm not safe, right? So you try and control everything. I'm not worthy. So you're constantly pushing to prove yourself through success. right? But see, that belief, it generates a compensating identity. It fuels your entire structure of life, right? So your mission is now to, you know, uncover that belief so you stop building your future on the lie, right? And that belief has built your entire identity. Every decision, every goal, every relationship, you know, everything is filtered through that original wound. Your job now is to stop feeding it, stop building your future on the foundation of lack. Right? You're not here to fix what's broken. You're here to create from what's already whole. Okay? You're not here to fix the past. You're here to create what you truly love. Okay? Move number 3. Reorientate around what you truly love. Right? Superconscious creation is driven by pure desire, not distorted needs. So ask yourself, if no one praised me or judged me, what would I create? If money was no object, what would I create? If I wasn't trying to prove anything, what would I create? Right? What am I secretly obsessed with but afraid to admit it? This is your compass. Don't just follow your passion, follow your patterns, right? The desire that leads you home to yourself. Okay, and move number 4, train the body to be a temple of truth. Right? Your nervous system must be retrained to hold truth. Why? Because if you spend 20 to 40 years or whatever reacting from ego, your body is wired to create from that stress loop. So now structure becomes your ally. Right? So get the morning silence in, get the exercise in, right? Get the breath work in, the journaling. You know, these are the tools that I use to help myself. And if they work for me, I'm pretty sure they work for you. Right? The superconscious speaks softly. So you need to slow down enough to hear it. And discipline here isn't about control, it's about attunement. Right? And the last one, make sovereignty your stand, right? The final trap, thinking that the next version of you will be the one who's finally enough. That's still ego. You're not becoming someone. You're revealing who you've always been underneath all these masks. True creation begins when you stop trying to improve yourself and you start trusting the intelligence that built you. You don't need to be better. You're perfect just as you are. You need to be present. And from presence, you create from soul, not for survival. Okay? And we'll talk about the one last thing, right? The last trap, and I touched on this earlier, right? Because you've survived the collapse, right? You've went through the void. You've rebuilt with structure. And just when you think you're in the clear, the ego shows back up. But this time, it's wearing, a white robe and talking about surrender. And this is the final trap. Spiritual identity. It's cleaner, it's softer, but it's still a performance, right? You start identified, and this is what I talk about. This is what happened to me, right? As the healed man, the awakened one, the light worker, you stop being honest because now your identity is tied to being enlightened. And, it's so easy to fall into this trap, as I discovered. And what you don't realize is you've built a new mask. And one that's harder to drop because now people praise you, they look to you from guidance, and it can feel good. So this is, you're just adopting a new mask, and it works until it doesn't work, right? It feels good until it doesn't feel good. Okay, and I learned this the hard way. And when the ego survives ego death, it can reinflate with spiritual superiority, and because it speaks the right language, it hides even deeper in your psyche. And this is what you call spiritual bypass, right? And there's studies that show that even after ego disruption, the brain seeks identity reinforcement. So if your new identity gets rewarded socially through likes, followers, praise, approval, you wire that as your new survival mechanism. It's not evolution, it's just an adaptation disguised as depth. Right? And in Zen, this trapping is known as the stink of Zen, right? The odor of false enlightenment. When someone claims spiritual depth but still acts from ego, control, attachment. True masters, they stay humble, hidden, and present. They don't speak from superiority. They walk as servants of truth. Right? And Epictetus said, it is impossible for a man to learn what he thinks he already knows. Right? And that's the danger of spiritual ego. It thinks it's above the lesson. And the moment you stop being a student, you stop evolving. Right? And I caught myself in it. Right? Sharing deep truths, but doing it to be seen, teaching spiritual insight while not dealing with my own shit. That's not awakening. That's just an ego rebrand. Right? And this is the test I give myself. Am I saying this because it's real? or because it keeps me relevant? Am I acting for truth or from the poised version of who I think I'm supposed to be now? Right? And this is it. You know, I'm not perfect. I still have my flaws. I still deal with shit every day. I'm on this journey like you know, and I don't have every answer, but you know what? I will share what I do experience and what I go through. Because to be that savage man doesn't need to appear spiritual. He just needs to be honest, aligned, awake. And that includes to his own bullshit. Because the highest path isn't the one with the most followers, the most likes, the most shares. It's the one that keeps you the most free. Because it's now time to become whole without the mask. Okay, once the ego is gone, once the old persona is dead, once the spiritual masks have been stripped away, what you're left with is a man that you're always meant to be. Not the addict, not the businessman, not the healer, the teacher, the guru, just you. Not built from trauma, not chasing validation, not trying to perform anything for anyone, just showing up moment by moment with nothing but your breath, your awareness, your integrity. And this is where the real journey begins. When you live from super conscious self-command, not from reaction, but from alignment. That's what I've experienced over the past, I would say 18 months, because I went through a big period of the void again, and I've openly spoke about this, and it lasted for about 18 months. And after that void, then it was the rebuild started, and I'm still in the rebuilding stage right now. And and I've still had to face that final trap, okay, in the past, and I'm very wary of it now. But I've let go of the needing to be seen. I've just started living as someone who no longer needs to explain himself. And I really, honestly, am at the point where I don't give a shit what anybody thinks or says about me. I'm just being me. And if nobody likes it, that's on them. It's nothing to do with me, what their opinion of me is. Right. And I started leading my family from presence, not from pressure. Right. And I still train every single fucking day. And again, it's not to look good. Right. But it's to set an example. It's to clear my mind. It's for all the other reasons. And looking good is just, you know, what happens in the process. And now I create from a place of flow, not force. Right? And this is why this YouTube channel I have wanted to do for so long. But now I've been on this journey, I love it. You know, and there's no force in it. Okay? And this is where my fatherhood, my leadership, my purpose, they started to finally mean something real, not to anybody else, but to me. Because it's not about building status anymore. It's about becoming the man that I wanted to be my whole life. Right, and this is what is called self-authorship. It's the final stage of adult development where your choices are no longer driven by trauma, tribe, or image, but by internal truth. Right, and there's been studies on post-ego status show that neuroplasticity increases when identity no longer resists reality. You become more creative, more adaptable, more in tune with what actually matters because your brain isn't burning energy to try to defend a false self-image anymore. Right? And the Shaolin path ends where it begins, with emptiness. The monk who has mastered it himself returns to simplicity, not to prove, not to perform, but to serve. And that's what being whole means. Not perfect, not enlightened, just real. And I believe that is me today. Okay, Marcus Aurelius, waste no more time arguing what a good man should be one. And that's the whole point of ego death, not to become someone, but to finally be no one pretending. And this is the man I believe I am today, present, grounded, aligned. I don't need to be seen, but I will be felt. Because when you live without a mask, your presence becomes your power. You don't have to force your voice to be heard. You know, your silence will carry weight. Your choices speak louder than the claims. And people who are meant to find you, they will find you and they will feel you. This is you on this channel, and I thank you from the bottom of my heart. And this is who you become after the ego dies. The masks fucking burn. Your soul finally steps up, not to perform, but to lead from truth. So if you are here right now, right, you might be in the void, in the collapse, or anywhere in between, and you feel like, everything's being stripped away, good. It means that the masks are finally falling off. You're not broken, you're not failing, you're not going crazy, you're just facing what most men run from their entire lives. Let them chase success, let them stay in them, right? But you're here for something greater, something deeper. This path will cost you everything you're pretending to be, but it will give you back the one thing that you cannot be faked, and that is your true self. So please do not quit now. Don't numb out. Don't build another identity to escape the silence. Sit in the silence, breathe through it, show up like a fucking warrior. because there's a version of you waiting on that other side. Not a perfect man, right? But a real one, aligned, present, free. That's the one your wife needs, your partner needs, your children need, you need. And when you're ready to walk with other men who have been through that fire too, we're out here, quiet, solid, focused. And we don't need to say much because we see each other. And I see you, brother. And if this spoke to you, you know, give me a wee like, drop something in the comments, just let me know, tell your truth. Don't be scared. Okay, and share this with another brother who needs to hear it. And if you want to follow me on this journey and join this brotherhood, subscribe. Okay, hit the notification bell. Because if you're ready to live from soul, not from survival, you're ready to keep showing up because you're not about becoming someone new, you're remembering who the fuck you've always been, then join me because I want to be part of that journey. And as always, I truly love you from the bottom of my heart. Thank you for being with me on this journey. I'll catch you on the next one. Got a video for you here, and you can subscribe here. Take care. Bye bye.